Weekend number 2 for Deadpool and Wolverine. It proved to be not as profitable as weekend number 1, but honestly, not that bad. Not that bad at all. A 54.2% drop off week after week. That's awfully good in Marvel realm. Hell, that's awfully good in general. And if you take a look at the entire total, by the time that you see this video, or hell, especially by weekend number 3, she's gonna be $1 billion film. Okay, 100%, given the fact that, yeah, $824 million at time of recording Monday evening. She's a banger, bro, and could very easily become the best performing R-rated film of all time, if not, and if it continues on a similar trajectory, because you compare it to the most profitable film out there right now, and Inside Out 2, it's actually tracking better in the first 10 days than Inside Out 2, so given there's going to be more family affair for competition, there's a possibility. There's a possibility that Deadpool and Wolverine, the R-rated Marvel film, where I thought we were supposed to be in the throes of superhero fatigue. I thought that an R-rated film couldn't end up being the best performing film of the year. Looks like there are a couple of preconceived notions that could end up throwing all of that out the window. And then also, like, I've listened to a few reviews, and general sentiment is, yeah, the story's a mess, the character works good, the acting is as good as it's ever been from the titular characters, but nothing has really swayed me to go to the theaters or to even check this out. It's going to be yet another film that I'm just not going to bother with. Obviously, it appears to be I'm in the minority, but we also know, and especially with Marvel's other announcements recently, they're going to end up learning all the wrong lessons from this, instead of looking at this going, yeah, you know what? People that are going to the theaters don't mind R-rated fare. Kind of want to go. They want to go for this funny buddy cop. You don't need diversity, inclusion, and equity points. All you need is good actors playing recognizable characters, and that'll sell a film. But no. What's Disney? What's Marvel? What's the wider industry going to learn from this one? Cameo Central. Instead of looking at this as the R-rated comedy, crowd-pleasing favorite that could go ahead and print her money in perpetuity. Because there's nothing saying that this needs to be a superhero staple moving forward. You can apply these principles to a bunch of other genres and be just as wildly successful. Somebody who is speaking on issues like this recently was Vince Vaughn when he was on Hot Ones. He was talking about R-rated comedies, why people aren't making them anymore. And I would say, in general, people aren't making comedies. You don't even have to say R-rated comedies. He makes the point that people in charge don't want to get fired, they overthink it. And we have the clip that's right here, and I think that it's probably important to play it in context because he makes some good points here.
But they just overthink it, and it's crazy. You get these rules. It's like if you did geometry and you said 87 degrees was a right angle, then all your answers were messed up instead of 9 degrees. So there became some idea or concept, like they would say something like you have to have an IP.
Yeah, right.
So for some reason, Battleship, which is like a game we used to play like a graph, became a vehicle for storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. The way that he sets this up is, yeah, okay, the writers and the producers ended up getting this edict from on high that is basically warped from the get-go, meaning that whatever you do it's all built on a faulty foundation, meaning that your project is ultimately not going to stand. You need to have an IP. You need to adhere to these rules over here. It has to be a recognizable brand to bring anybody into the theaters, when in actuality, you remember the heyday of comedies in the 80s, you can even go back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where you had recognizable faces, like you had Adam Sandler comedies, Mike Myers comedies, Chris Farley comedies, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy. Those were the guys who brought people to theaters. They weren't hopping on pre-established IPs, okay? 48 Hours, Beverly Hills Cop, Wayne's World, Austin Powers, those became franchises because there were premises that were there and then they were built upon afterwards. But okay, let's continue here, Vince.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
Whereas like an IP like John Hughes from our neck of the woods, right?
Mm-hmm.
An IP was a girl's turning 16. Like every girl turns 16. Or I'm going to cut school. Life situations. Or old school. What if I got...
Yeah, see, exactly. No, that's the point, okay? You have an idea for a show, and hell, make the show, right? Not you have this life story that you want to make a comedy out of, and it's like, okay, cool, well, how can we go ahead and make this a Polly Pocket vehicle? Don't need that.
Got to go back and, be in a fraternity now at this stage of the game. The people in charge don't want to get fired, more so than they're looking to do something great. So they want to kind of, follow a set of rules that somehow, like, it's set in stone, that don't really translate. But as long as they follow them, they're not going to lose their job. Because they can say, well, look, I
crunched the numbers.
Yeah, I made a movie off the board game Payday, so you can't, even though the movie didn't work, you can't let me go, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And you can just extrapolate that concept right out there to the superhero genre. How many of those films that came out, especially with Marvel in Phase 4 and Phase 5, how many of those are just generic action films that were bolstered by an already moving franchise? But if you just go ahead and strip out some of the character titles, it would be generally forgettable fare. To be honest, how many people actually remember, Shang-Chi, even with all the backing of Marvel? But it's an over-reliance on other people's successes instead of how Hollywood used to operate, was quality of the work would speak for itself. Even if you were doing an adaptation, it wouldn't get off the ground, because if you knew anything about the background of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Peter Jackson had a bitch of a time trying to get that made, and hell, he was even trying to compromise to cut it down to 2 films until he ended up at Miramax Studios saying, hey, isn't there 3 Tolkien Lord of the Rings books? Let's go ahead and roll the dice on that. So yes, as these budgets have ballooned far too much, as there is way too many cooks in the kitchen, there are people just trying to go along to get along. That's why there's so many yes men ruining not just comedy, but I would say the entire industry in general. But let's let Vince finish this off.
So people want to laugh. People want to look at stuff that feels a little bit like it's dangerous or pushing the envelope. And I think you're going to see more of it in the film space sooner than later, would be my guess.
It's weird, right? Like this Hot Ones guy, okay, like he got very interesting snippets out of, I think, Matt Damon or something like that. He gets interesting interviews, okay? I gotta watch more of his content. I've never watched a Hot Ones interview in my life, but I hear the little snippets, like Vince Vaughn making some very good points, and we'll read through the rest of this stuff, obviously. But yeah, like I said, Matt Damon, and he was also talking about how the mid-budget movie, okay, the $50 million film, doesn't get made today because it's not generally profitable. Yeah. You can point to Joker being made for 50 mil, making over $1 billion, but those examples are few and far between. No use pointing to the exception to try to disprove the rule. But those films that used to get made, the mid-budget, whatever was appropriate back in the 90s, $20 million turns into a $100 million success. The reason that you don't see any of those films going around right now is because of the death of the physical media market in the aftermath, okay? Because what was it? Dredd, Carl Urban's Dredd ended up being a relative bomb in the theaters, but ended up turning a profit because people picked up the DVD and the Blu-ray in the aftermath. The same reason that, Mike Myers, Austin Powers, the first one, was a bit of a flop at the theaters, but due to physical media sales, you ended up getting, for my money, the best in the trilogy, The Spy Who Shagged Me, afterwards, and that ended up doing gangbusters and Goldmember, my mistake. Which is still a good film, it just ended up being the most costly. I think it ended up making the most, but it definitely had the most star-studded cast, but none of that would have happened without physical media being there. So yeah, without that revenue stream, with all of those films just getting dumped on streaming, nobody really cares about telling a compelling story because there's no incentive to do better. That's why you don't get risk takers in Hollywood. That's why it's just all stocked with people scared instead of adventurous. Vince Vaughn believes Hollywood executives are too cautious nowadays when it comes to financing a type of R-rated comedies that launched his career. Vaughn, known for comedy films such as Swingers, which wasn't made for a lot of money. Old School, I love Old School. I got a soft spot for it, but Wedding Crashers, that's probably my favorite Vince Vaughn film. I watch Wedding Crashers way too much. It's great. Shared his thoughts on the decline of raunchy R-rated comedies during his recent appearance on Hot Ones. They just overthink it, and it's like, you're crazy to get these rules. It's like he did geometries, and you said 87 degrees is the right angle, then all your answers are messed up. Instead of 90 degrees, you have an IP. Blasey, we heard all of that to begin with. Vaughn used the board game Battleship, yes, which inspired the 2012 film starring Brooklyn Decker, trying to launch a supermodel's career off of a board game movie, turning into a vehicle for storytelling. And here we are, just a little bit better than a decade later, where you're trying to have the Barbie cinematic universe with the Polly Pocket film, which thankfully doesn't have Lena Dunham attached to it anymore. Surprised how they got that film out of her orbit. Meanwhile, the IP he would see early in his career with shared life experiences such as turning 16 or cutting school. Yeah, exactly. Write what you know, but not in the way that Russell T Davies has infected Doctor Who with writing what he knows. Just writing about relatable experiences, not niche fetishes. But Vaughn is hopeful that films similar to R-rated comedies from the 90s and early 2000s will return to the big screen. People want to laugh. People want to look at stuff that feels a little bit like it's, dangerous or pushing the envelope. And I think that you're going to see more of it out of film space sooner than later. Now, that would be my guess. And yeah, that's what I'm seeing right now, especially with Deadpool and Wolverine dominating the box office. It's R-rated. It's got blood. It's got swearing. Doesn't have any boobs, but hopefully, that's kind of a staple of an R-rated comedy. We can return to that now that the ice has been broke on that. But I just hope. Here's the thing, though, okay? Even if we do return to R-rated comedies, okay, somebody just decides that, yep, this is the direction that we're going to need to go. We understand that the cinema experience is going to be a little bit more boutique, meaning that we can get a little bit more artistic. I just hope that sharp, witty writing that we had those 90s and 2000s comedies also comes back around. But I look at the scripts that are dominating the top of the box office, and yeah, I'm just glad that we do have the physical media releases of those 90s and 2000s comedies, because those times, yeah, they aren't really going to come back in mass. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.